God must be worshipped in spirit and in truth. And what that means is that God has to be experienced in silence within, in inner communion. He must be worshipped in spirit means that we have to rise above body consciousness. We can't just be stuck in the thought, I am this body. We are spirit. We're having a human experience, but we are not this body. We are so much more than that. It's a sort of trick of duality for us to think that infinite spirit has been crushed into this little body and it lives for 50 to 100 years and that's it. It's over. No, we are so much more than that. So that's what it means to worship God in spirit. To worship Him in truth means that we have to come to the point where we actually, in reality, experience that ecstatic oneness with God. Not just intellectual, oh yes, God is peace, and God is love, and God is, and what's for lunch, you know? It has to be a real experience. It has to be that ecstatic oneness. And that is our destiny. That's what we're striving for. After service today, Dharmadas and I are going to fly to Russia. 5th year in a row. And I think the world needs little peace ambassadors teaching meditation all the more. But, I thought we've taught meditation techniques in Russia, in India, in America, in Canada, and Singapore, and Europe, and all these different places. And people always come up after we've explained Hong Sa, the basic mantra, the first meditation technique of our path. And they say, I just can't do it. My mind is restless. And we say, maybe through a translator, maybe in English, but we just say, well, that's what minds are. They're restless. And that's what we have to practice the technique for, to help us concentrate, to help us get beyond body consciousness, to affirm, as Hong Sa says, I am spirit. I am He. We're in this little delusion game, and we have to figure it out. It's not as though we're in this house of mirrors and we have to just experience the mirrors so often and so long that we get bored and we don't care. It's that we have to see through the trick. We have to go inside. There's an ancient story that says when God first created the universe, He created people, and they sat down and they meditated and they merged right back into Him. And He said, he scratched his head, I'm sure. Now, what can I do about this? And he had one of the devotees there with him who had just merged back in. And he said, so how about if I hide myself in the deepest ocean? And the devotee said, no, they'll find you. The farthest star? Not good enough. How about the highest mountain peak? The deepest cave? Won't work. Well, what do you suggest then? You can imagine God asking this. Well, what do you suggest? Hide yourself where they'll never find you, Lord. within each human being. And that's what God did, and that was a few gazillion years ago, and we're still not getting the joke. We have to go inside, and even a little practice of pulling back inside, trying to find that peace within, trying to plumb the silence within, even a little practice. And we start to realize that presence, that silent presence of God is there. And the more we experience it, then the restless thoughts, then the restless emotions start to calm down. Why do we want that? Why don't we want the excitement of more and more emotions and more feelings and more commotion? Because it leads to suffering. And we get tired of suffering. And we want peace. And what happens is the more you find that peace inside, the more fun everything is. It's not so tense. It's not so nerve-wracking. It starts to become more joyful. You start to be able to perceive reality on a deeper level, and you can actually help people. You're not just blowing them off because you're in such a panic yourself. You don't have time for anything. You actually can care more. And everything, Swami says, even becomes more beautiful. Colors become more beautiful. The world becomes more beautiful. Music is more intense. We need that state. And it is our destiny. It's what we were created for. And the important point to remember with this topic of what is the best way to worship is that those three little words that are so important to the devotee day to day. Those three words. Are you ready? Can you guess? You can choose. You can choose right now in this moment where your consciousness is, where you want to be in your life. Do you want to live in the thrill of God and how you are on the path to finding Him? Or do you want to live on CNN with the news? Or do you want to live in the craziness of the world? Choose God. You have that choice every moment in your own consciousness. And remember that Yogananda said that devotion plus Kriya Yoga technique works like spiritual mathematics. It cannot fail. We can achieve those higher states. We have the tools. We just have to put the talent into it, which means the energy, the willingness, the desire. If we do that, it works like spiritual mathematics. It cannot fail.
This affirmation today was well timed for our departure. The whole world is my home and the human race, my family. And it's important for us to remember that, because seeing God as spirit, seeing God as truth means to see a reality that is beyond whatever present point of view we bring. It's so easy to be sort of caught in our own reality, our own little world. And this worship of God in spirit and in truth, it represents a very interesting reality for us. It's a divine romance. And we may think that we are the ones chasing after God. In fact, it's actually rather the reverse. We are being chased by God, and Master Yogananda recited the poem, or actually recorded his reading of the poem, The Hound of Heaven, many years ago. And it's a lovely recording, and in this poem, God is described as this hound that's chasing after this man who is trying to find every possible reason to avoid the divine reality that's chasing up behind him. And we do the same thing. For eons, we have so many more interesting things to think about and look at and deal with. And if we would ever just stop, turn around, slow down. I'm reminded of an image. I don't know if this will strike a chord with you, but it did with me. If you think of a little boy who's maybe 5 or 6 years old and really fast, really speedy on his little pins, and he's going around the house in circles at high speed, and except that there's a ladies' tea going on in the living room, and the ladies are all dressed up, and they're drinking tea out of fine china, and he's rounding the corner, and he's about to, it's not going to be a good ending at all. And Dad or somebody reaches out and says, "Whoa there, buddy, whoa, whoa, whoa. You're about to go into a situation that your speed is not helpful in this situation." And we're a little bit like that. We just get all wound up. We get moving so fast. And every once in a while, the divine is just saying, slow down there. You don't have to be out of control. I'm right here with you. Nirmala was telling the trick or the joke of this life where God has hidden the truth deep in our own hearts. And I was reminded of a dear friend of Swamiji's named Derek Bell, was a world famous harpist and Irish, very, very Irish, in fact, and had an amazing and very Irish sense of humor. And I remember one of his little wry comments, because he was masterful at all these Irish instruments. He played the sackbut, if anybody's ever even heard of such an instrument, and of course the harp and several other things. And he recorded the two albums, the two Mystic Harp albums, which are wonderful. But anyway, one little joke. He was oozing with jokes. They were just kind of coming out of him as easily as words of any kind, which were also coming out of him in great vigor. He said, "The Irish gave the Scottish the bagpipes about, I don't know how many hundreds, maybe 1,000 years ago." He said, "But the Scottish still haven't got the joke yet." And we have been playing along in the delusion and playing and looking here and looking there, and we still haven't got the joke yet. We have to find it inside, and we have to be willing to try. Nirmala's point about, oh, but my mind wanders. Yeah, well, guess what? That's what minds do. But just the simple act of watching the breath, just the simple act of bringing the heart to rest. In a few moments, the choir is going to sing the beautiful song that Swami wrote, "What is Love?" Is it only ours, or does love whisper in the flowers? Surely we, children of this world, could not love by our own powers. What is joy? Is it just a dream, or is joy all nature's theme? Are the clouds mindless after all, or is joy all nature's theme? God is dead, so men say. Can't they see all life's his play? And I just love this. Swami writes right into the song, not a church binds him as its own, not a creed makes him fully known. Foolish we if we limit him, every atom is his home. Think of that vastness, that reach of infinity. And we like to confine him into our own terms and say, oh, but I like to worship him this way, but you like to do it some other way. And this other, I'm reminded of a Jewish friend telling me, well, you know, if there were 2 Jewish people on a desert island, they would need 3 synagogues. One for you, one for me, and one for the both of us. And you know, it sounds sort of goofy, but you know, if you think about it, there's actually a deep truth in that. And it's not just because they're sort of cantankerous or something. It's because there's my reality, and there's your reality, and then there's the shared reality that we bring together. And those are all 3 of them honorable. They are all 3 of them valid. It's not to say that we can never, ever jam a square peg into a round hole. It does not work. And I was reflecting on the slight compromise that is required in order to be together in a group, in a worship, because it still has to come to each individual person. Swami wrote the song, Go On Alone, now retitled Walk Like a Man. Even though you walk alone, why court approval once the road is known? Let come who will, but if they all turn home, the goal still awaits you. Go on alone. And he dedicated that song to the cooperative communities movement, which just sounds kind of crazy. Go on alone together. And yet, in a very real sense, that's the strength of anything that we can do together, is that we have our own deepest self committed to it, our own soul committed to it. Because if we experience God in the silence of our own hearts, then of course we can experience him together in a group. There have been a number of satellites sent out to the far planets over the last 50 years. Starting in the 70s, the Voyager probes were sent out to, well, now they're even beyond the solar system. But they did this interesting thing. And we got to know a woman in Seattle when we lived up in Seattle years ago who did the math, who was writing the programming so that these probes could hit their targets as they would go by the planets very precisely, so they wouldn't have to waste fuel and so on. It was an amazing thought. It's as if you took a BB gun and shot a BB from here to New York and went through a lifesaver, a little, candy. That's the level of accuracy that they were striving for. Anyway, what they did is they would take this probe and they would send it around a large planet like Jupiter, and Jupiter's intense gravity would act like a slingshot, or in my way of looking at it, if you've ever seen an automatic pitching machine, a baseball pitching machine, the balls are all up in a sort of a box, and they roll down this chute one at a time, and they hit this ball this wheel, it's spinning around really fast, and they get squeezed for a moment as they hit that thing, and then it comes firing out the little end of which is kind of goofy if you're ever standing there batting, because you can never figure out when the ball's going to come out. And if it's coming at you at 70 miles an hour, it's practically past you by the time you even know that it came out. But anyway, the point being that gravitational pull is a trajectory. It's sending that, it's energizing that thing. And we have to look at group meditation, group worship in that way also. We use the power of the group magnetism to augment our own efforts, but it can never replace them. It can never replace what has to happen in the temple of our own hearts and in the temple of our own bodies. And that's why we sang in the temple of silence, in the temple of peace, or in the temple of samadhi, I will meet thee, I will touch thee, I will love thee. That part is our job. That's the part we have to do. And the more we do it, the more we turn to face the divine that has been chasing us through eons. And we can finally prepare ourselves for the wedding of the universe, the wedding of infinity, where we receive that and we say, I will be yours through eternity, and you will be mine through eternity. Both together, not just self-offering into oblivion, but offering into a unity that will be ours forever. Let us take that opportunity that we have in this lifetime to worship God in spirit and in truth, as Nirmala was describing, in the silence, in the stillness of our own hearts, and in the bliss of our own potential.